Om Jnana-timirandhasya Jnananjana-shalakaya Chakshurinmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Well, first of all, thank you to all of you for coming here. You may be wondering why we're doing it out in the middle of a field when we could be doing it in the city with all conveniences. Well, there are several reasons for that. One reason is to get out of the city. As you may be aware, Srila Prabhupada recommended most of his followers to get out of the city. Srila Prabhupada strongly advocated that devotees can live on the land, live simply among devotees, away from all the sense gratificatory diversions of the city, to live simply without having to engage in ugra karma or pungent activities, to live with devotees, and to chant Hare Krishna. So there are several advantages of this. One thing is that we get good association by living with devotees, and we avoid bad association. We get fresh food and fresh air and fresh water which are simply not available in the cities. Peaceful life. Of course, if our mind is not peaceful, then we bring it with us. But to come to the relatively peaceful atmosphere of the country is a great help in helping to make the mind peaceful. And living in the country helps us to appreciate Krishna. All over the world you won't find many atheistic farmers, because they can appreciate that the great workings of nature are directed by a higher authority. We are dependent on God for sufficient and properly ordered rain, light, heat, and so on. The growth of plants from a seed to its mature form is a miracle. So the modern way of life is extremely artificial. It's supposed to be a great facility that we have electricity, but the actual result is that nowadays people, they work 24 hours. Previously people didn't used to work all night. Whereas in situations without electricity and without so many different diversions, people just go to sleep early and rise early as they get in, they're in tune with nature's chronometer. Here's an interesting little anecdote, true anecdote, that in England, one woman brought her daughter to the allotment, means where she, like you have your dacha here, where they grow their food. And she brought along her daughter's friend. Both the girls were about 5 or 6 years old. And the woman dug up some carrots and showed, here, some fresh carrots to the young girls. And her daughter's little friend said in total disgust that my mother doesn't get carrots from the ground, she gets them nice and clean in a plastic bag from the shop. I know in London that children, maybe about by the age of 8 or 9, who live in London or any big city, at some point they're taken by their school on a trip outside the city, so for the first time in their life they can see what a cow and other such creatures happens to be. And all the children are astonished. So modern city life is extremely artificial. It is not conducive for developing spiritual consciousness. Of course, it's not impossible to develop spiritual consciousness in a city, but it is a less favorable situation to do so. So, Srila Prabhupada very much wanted to establish Varnashram. Varnashram doesn't just mean living on the land. It means a lot more than that. But living on the land is a good start. Srila Prabhupada had a social program. He could see that many of his disciples were falling down, and that it's not such an easy thing in the modern world to establish pure devotional service, considering that so many devotees have problems following even the basic regulative principles. So Srila Prabhupada had this actually very ambitious program to restructure human society on the Varnashram principles given by Krishna. Now we might say, well, that's just not possible. And sometimes nowadays we hear devotees say that. If at all Varnashram is discussed, mostly it's not much discussed in our society. There seems to be a general consensus that it's not possible to establish. Well, that's what everyone thought before Srila Prabhupada went to the West, that it's not possible to preach Krishna consciousness in the West. No. Srila Prabhupada showed that it was possible to establish Krishna consciousness in the West. No one believed it. And he left for his disciples the task of establishing Varnashram. Because if we are actually to establish Krishna consciousness in a very widespread way, if it's not just restricted to a few people in here and there who come together now and then we are going to have a different social system and a different culture, because the present social system and culture are based on competition, exploitation, and sense gratification. Exploitation. It is based on the ignorance of thinking that we are the body. And from this ignorance of identifying with the body, develop all other problems. So Srila Prabhupada, practically the main thrust of his preaching all over the world was to first of all try to get people to understand that we are not the body, but that we are suffering life after life because in every birth we think we are the body. And that human life is meant for getting out of this ignorance and out of the suffering of the cycle of birth and death. So, to help everyone make progress in this great endeavor, it's very favorable to have a whole culture which is based on that. The materialistic civilization is based on foolishness. Even though they have big universities and very intelligent people, from another perspective, they're just all fools. In the university, they'll discuss all kinds of different things, but all of them together, there may be thousands of people, if you include the faculty and the students at the university, but none of them are asking the really important questions of life. Why is there suffering? How can we get free from suffering? Who are we? Why do we have to die? And people who do try to give some kind of answers to these questions give, in the Western world, they give inane answers. Inane means stupid. For instance, as a child, I learned that all the suffering in the world is caused because a long time ago someone ate an apple. It's not very, it doesn't very much appeal to the intelligence, this idea. Yeah, he's suffering, yeah? He's suffering and pain in the leg. That's because Adam ate an apple. We better get chairs for all these stiff-legged people. Can someone with a more supple leg run up and get a chair? Okay, one of the young men. Run. Go get a chair. Okay, it doesn't need 3 people to get one chair. One should be enough. We appreciate your enthusiasm. So, because this idea really doesn't make any sense, then the next development of this inane theology, which has shaped the culture of the Western world is that, well, you better believe it, otherwise you'll burn in hell forever. So practically the whole of the Western world, or what used to be the Christian world, is the whole culture has developed either from this stupid idea or from the rejection of it. So those who rejected it, they became empiricists, rationalists, humanists, communists, atheists, agnostics, and so on and so on. Yeah, materialist. Materialist is the blanket term for all of them. Although a few had some quasi-spiritual ideas. So Srila Prabhupada for the first time brought, at least for the first time since the time of Parashuram, brought the actual knowledge to the Western world. And this philosophy and the understanding that comes from it, to cultivate that and to live by it requires a different culture than that of the culture of ignorance. So you may wonder, what's living in the mud, digging up carrots, got to do with high philosophy? Well, as Srila Prabhupada said, quoting who, I can't remember. It wasn't Srila Prabhupada's original quote. Simple living and high thinking. The aim of life for devotees to come to the village is not simply to grow carrots. Of course, in many ways that is better than working in a factory, is to cultivate your own land. But the real aim is to live in the association of devotees very simply and healthily, and to cultivate not only a garden, but to cultivate Krishna consciousness. So this is Srila Prabhupada's social program. It can be done. We should have the confidence that it can be done. It would have developed more if our whole society, Srila Prabhupada's society, had got behind it, promoted it. Somehow that hasn't happened, but still it is a very important instruction of Srila Prabhupada, which if you study carefully Srila Prabhupada's books, lectures, letters and conversations, then you can see that this establishment of Varnashram was a very important part of Srila Prabhupada's mission. Varnashram is not the goal of life. Krishna consciousness is beyond Varnashram. But Varnashram is a help for us to live peacefully and stably and develop Krishna consciousness. So I wanted to have the festival here for several reasons. One of them was to let the devotees come and see, at least for a few days, how other devotees have taken this step outside the city and onto the land. That it can be done. It's not impossible. Myself, I'm spending quite a lot of time in such rural devotees communities. In the last 2 or 3 years, I've been spending time. It's quite suitable for me to write also. So in recent years, some new communities have been established in India. When we say establish a community, that's quite a bold statement. We can say that at least a start has been made. We can really say that a community is established when the grandchildren of the founders still live on the land and are in Krishna consciousness. So I don't expect to live. It's very unlikely that I live to see whether these communities are actually firmly established. But we have to make a start. Nowadays, foresters mostly plant pine trees because they grow quickly and then you can sell them. Now, previously, it was considered, in the West, it was considered a better social act to plant an oak tree. The person who plants an oak tree doesn't get any benefit personally from doing so. Only in future, when the oak tree is fully mature, that'll be more than 100 years, then it can be cut, and the wood is excellent wood for various purposes. Future generations will benefit. But modern society is blind to the need of future generations. It is sarvartan viparitan, as stated in Bhagavad Gita. Persons in the mode of ignorance, they just get everything all wrong. Their understanding is completely opposite to what it should be. And so they're interested only in what they see to be the short-term benefit. They'll cause tremendous environmental damage, which future generations will then have to suffer from, just so they can get some short-term benefit. So many people all over the world are waking up to this absurd and horrible situation in which the present generation of mankind is just messing up the whole world for future generations. So these projects, they're also one kind of preaching, because many people are interested in seeing how we can live without grossly misusing the resources of the earth. One of my godbrothers in Brazil, Purusha Swami, he has established a simple living, high-thinking, Krishna-conscious community there in Brazil. And it's given him tremendous opportunities for preaching. He can go in the university and speak about what the devotees are doing and why, and people take him very seriously. Because he's not just talking some philosophy, but he's living it. And showing practically how others can live it also. Of course, those who are sannyasis, it doesn't really matter to them that much. They can live in any situation. But most of the people, most devotees are not going to be sannyasis or renunciants. So in today's confused and highly distressed world, if we can show how people can live family life simply, happily, depending on Krishna, that in itself is great preaching. So Purusha Swami goes in the universities, and many groups come to visit their farm. And he does explain to them that our aim is not simply to live in an ecologically balanced way, but we have a very high philosophy and purpose of life behind all of this. So you might think that, well, going to the country and growing carrots, what's that got to do with preaching? Of course, it's not only carrots, there's also cauliflowers, beetroots, potatoes, and many other. And actually, cow protection is it's central to Vedic culture. That has particular challenges in the modern world, especially in the Western world. But actually, this is preaching. We can show others that, yes, we do have an alternative. We're not simply criticizing the modern society, which we should be doing. As Srila Prabhupada often said, the modern society is like a cat and dog society. Because there's no there's no spiritual aim. Simply ahara nidra bhai maitun, eating, sleeping, mating and defending. So we should criticize the materialistic society.
Поэтому преданные должны критиковать современное материалистическое общество.
But we should also demonstrate that there is another way to live apart from the artificial city way of life. which, by the way, is time-bound. It's not going to last very long. It's because the whole way of life of the modern world is extremely artificial, it can collapse at any time. Just like, for instance, a big city like Moscow, if for any reason there's the water supply, the electricity supply, the food supply is stopped for more than a few hours, it becomes a major disaster. The United Kingdom, Great Britain, imports, I'm not sure, maybe more than 80% of its food. They spend billions of pounds annually on military forces to defend that little island stuck in the North Sea. But it's like the Achilles heel that if they do get into a conflict and then the food supply doesn't come through regularly, they're all going to starve very soon. So, another major factor is that this whole modern society runs on oil. And the oil is running out, which means that we have all these highways and there won't be, the cars won't have any fuel to run on them within maybe one generation. So, you may say, well, why live like this? It may well be that for our children or grandchildren there isn't any other way to live. So we see that mostly devotees, they're not much inclined to live like this, because the city has certain comforts which people are used to. It seems to be a very hard and austere life to leave the city. But there are pros and cons. Like I say, here you'll get fresh air, fresh food, fresh water. You don't have to engage in ugra karma. Physically, you're going to be almost certainly more healthy coming here. It may be difficult on the body in some ways, austere, but it's much better for the mind, because one is not surrounded by materialistic people who just exude materialistic vibrations. They just create a whole atmosphere that we've got to get money and we've got to enjoy ourselves. There are advertisements everywhere. Buy this, buy that. Buy this beer or this vodka. So when we're living in the city, we don't even notice how much this actually adversely affects our consciousness. But in this, when we come here, we can find that, especially after some time, we'll find the mind, although it's maybe difficult for the body in some ways, for the mind it's refreshing. And whatever the difficulties may be, they are more than compensated by the fact that we can live with devotees, have kirtan daily with devotees, and discuss the philosophy given in Srila Prabhupada's books among devotees daily. So, although we don't expect all devotees to take up this way of life, at least we want to congratulate those who have made a start in doing so by coming here, and to encourage them. Of course, as I said, Varnashram, it's not just living on the land. Developing a community is a great challenge, especially in the modern age where most people are crazy. That's not just some kind of insulting statement that I'm making, but it has shastric backing. Nunang pramatah kurute vikarma yadindriya pritiya aprinoti na sadhu manye yata atmano yang asannapi kleshada asadeha. Rishabdev says that people are definitely insane if they act in they perform sinful activities so that they get another body to suffer. That's everyone in the modern world, pretty much. And although devotees are the most exalted people, having taken to devotional service, we all come from this background of insanity. And the more the emphasis is on sense gratification, the more crazy and disturbed people become. And this is clearly observable in Russia in the last generation. Now, we're not advocating a return to the communist system, although Srila Prabhupada did speak of spiritual communism. But in the communist system, there wasn't much opportunity for sense gratification. I mean, there was opportunity for sense gratification, but not as much as now. And we find that it's observable within the recent history of Russia that as the society has changed into one which is focused on personal sense gratification, people in general have become more discontent, of worse character, and, to put it simply, crazy. Which is maybe one reason why within our ISKCON today there's a lot of talk about Vaishnava relationships. Because pretty much everyone today has a highly disturbed mind. That is a prominent symptom of Kali Yuga, as is stated in Srimad Bhagavatam. Can anyone cite a famous verse in which that's stated? Anyone? Well, I guess your inability to cite it substantiates the verse. Prayan alpayusha sabhya kalavasmin yuge janaha manda sumanda matyo manda bhagya hi upadrutaha. O learned one, in this age of Kali, people have but short lives. They are mandasuma, they are dull-headed, unlucky, and above all, their minds are always disturbed. So this is a very common verse, and I request all of you to, especially those who have taken Brahminical initiation, to learn this verse, because otherwise it suggests that you're dull-headed, which you're not supposed to be after coming to Krishna consciousness. So people's minds are disturbed. It's quite observable, isn't it? You can look outside to see that people's minds are disturbed, and we can look inside also into our own mind and find that it's a boiling cauldron of all kinds of strange ideas and desires. So we have this very high aim of pure love of Krishna. But practically, we're all coming from a background of being insane to varying degrees. So when we try to be Krishna conscious, we try to act on a very high platform. Sometimes or often we revert to lower consciousness. So Vaishnava relationships has become a major topic of discussion among our devotees. And often devotees, they invoke the mundane psychology or New Age psychology, which is also mundane, but it's just mundane in a different way. Chaitanya Mahaprabhu has suggested a superb system of psychological recovery. Chaito Darpana Marjanam, cleansing the heart by Sri Krishna Sankirtana. The modern psychology, the psychologists, they're also insane. Vedic psychology recognizes that the problems are Kam, Krodh, Lobh, Moha, Mada, Matsarya, lust, anger, greed, illusion, pride, and envy, which are all based on forgetfulness of Krishna. But modern psychologists, they think that karma, desire, is something very good. So how can they solve the mental problems when they think that to be mentally balanced is to cooperate with others so that we can all mutually enjoy sense gratification. So Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's psychiatric treatment is Cheto Darpana Marjanam. Cleanse the heart from all the impurities, lust, greed, anger, etc. by chanting the holy names. And that is especially chanting Sankirtan in association with others. But then again, the question of relationships comes. We're chanting with others, but I can't stand them. They're just so uncultured and badly behaved and unreasonable. And others might be thinking the same thing about us. So what's the solution? We have to chant together with others, but we can't get on with others. Well, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu suggests Kirtaniya Sada Harihi, always chant. If we're always chanting with others, then there's less opportunity to criticize them, hit them on the head with a hammer, and do other things which cause distress. But then we may find that we're not advanced enough to always chant the holy names, or we have other things to do like digging up carrots. And then we come into the field of human intercourse. So how to deal with all these crazy people who are trying to chant Hare Krishna with our own crazy mind, which is also trying to chant Hare Krishna. Chaitanya Mahaprabhu has very mercifully given a formula for that also. You don't have to go to the university for 6 years studying all the neuropsychological processes going on between your ears. Chaitanya Mahaprabhu doesn't recommend looking into a crystal ball or looking at tea leaves. Do you have that here in Russia?
No.
Look at the tea leaves and say, well, this shows da-da-da-da-da-da and da-da-da-da-da-da, and it's all got to do with the tea leaves. Well, anyway, devotees don't drink tea. But apart from that, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu has given a much better formula for Vaishnava relationships. It's called Trinada Pisudachena Torari Vasahishthana Amanina Manadena Kirtanaya Sadaharihi. That we should actually consider ourselves very lowly and fallen. Of course, it's easy to say that, but it's not so easy to feel like that. But unless we start to cultivate that consciousness, we can't actually be Vaishnavas. And we have to be very tolerant of others. This is only possible if one is a Vaishnava. If we stop thinking that I'm the most important person and everyone should just act in the way that I think they should act, then we can begin to be tolerant of others. Culture of respect in which one is ready to respect others, but one doesn't desire to be respected by others. That is very different to the materialistic culture in which people behave with each other very roughly. People, they're so frustrated that they just deal with others in a manner that is calculated to cause mental distress to others. Get out of here, you fool. Who the hell do you think you are? This is not, such proclamations are not part of the culture of respect, which if we develop, then we can actually start moving toward the platform of always chanting the holy names. Kirtaniya Sada Harihi. So there are many challenges to establishing Vaishnava communities. A beginning is to come to the land and live on it. It's a very big move. But there's a lot more to do in developing community, relationships based on Vaishnava values. So we congratulate the devotees who have made the great first move. and who are working on making the second move also, which is purification by developing Vaishnava qualities. So I'd said that there were several reasons for holding the festival here. Of course, the main reason for any gathering like this is for satsanga, for good association, so that we can all come together and chant Hare Krishna together. Being fortunate to be a sannyasi in Srila Prabhupada's movement, I attend several such festivals and gatherings every year, and I and others like me, who are what you could call full-time ashram-based devotees, they note that the householder devotees, they appreciate these festivals even more than do the ashram-based devotees. Because ashram-based devotees, they live in a Vaikuntha atmosphere. There's always, they have full sadhana program every day. They're always living with devotees. Whereas devotees who don't have that facility, they do have to associate with that which is asat, or non-devotional, on a regular basis, most of their time. So they very much appreciate the opportunity where they can just, at least for a few days, live with devotees, chant Hare Krishna, and be in a completely devotional atmosphere, 24 hours a day. Devotees in Russia, those who can afford it, they're very fond of visiting the holy places in India. So that is very good. But maybe even better than that is to establish holy places here in Russia. Of course, there are many centers or temples of ISKCON throughout Russia. But generally only a few devotees can actually live in them. Others can visit. But if there are Vaishnava communities, then it would be just like Vrindavan. In Vrindavan, most of the people don't live in ashrams. They're householders who have their regular daily business to attend to. But the atmosphere is highly Krishna conscious, because everyone in one way or another is a devotee of Krishna. So Srila Prabhupada established New Vrindavan in the West. So that kind of community should be established everywhere, including in Russia. So at least for a few days we can all come together in these festivals. But if we can establish communities, then every day can be a festival for everyone. Of course, devotees have to be very serious. Srila Prabhupada said that simple living is only possible if you have bhakti. Because bhakti parishanubhavo viraktir anyatra. One who's actually advanced in devotional service, who's experiencing Krishna, they don't have any taste for anything else. So we're trying to foster an atmosphere of serious devotional service, where at least for these few days, everyone here will rise early and attend all the programs. Everyone will dress in distinctly Vaishnava clothing. Of course, you can be Krishna conscious in any clothing, or with no clothing, like Shukdev Goswami. But dressing in a manner that is distinctly recognizable as a Vaishnava also helps us to identify ourselves as Vaishnavas. So we've come here for this kind of atmosphere. We want to be very serious about Krishna consciousness. Krishna says in Bhagavad Gita that different kinds of people approach him. So among them are materialistic people who are interested in material gain. So we, at least while we're here, we don't want to exude a materialistic approach to life. And one advantage of having a festival in what we might call these somewhat austere conditions is that generally only serious devotees will come. And actually when the sun shines, it's not so good. When it's raining, it's better, because then everyone comes inside and listens to the... So in one way it'll be nice if the sun shines, but in another way it'll be nice if it rains. Anyway, we want to keep association with serious devotees. And you are all serious. You don't have to be here. You could have taken your holiday on the Black Sea coast, but instead you chose to come here to this... it's a small festival. There are many much bigger festivals of devotees in Russia. This is like a family gathering, you could say, because, I'm trying to make myself available at least for a few days in a year to my disciples in Russia. I have some serious responsibility toward you all. So, one of the main functions of a disciple is to hear from the Guru. So I'm trying to perform that duty, giving you something to hear. One devotee recently suggested that I could have the festival in a different area, and then I'd make new disciples in a different area. Well, that is possible. Although really the aim of our life is not really to collect more and more disciples. But I told him that I thought it's more important to help to maintain the present disciples rather than to make new ones. Otherwise it's an Alexander the Great policy, Alexander of Macedonia, as you say. He'd conquer one country and then move on to the next, and the other country which he'd conquered would revert to its previous rule. So, rather than making disciples and then half abandoning them, it's better to, in my estimation, to try to maintain those already there. So, normal program, as in other festivals, hearing and chanting about Krishna. I plan to speak on, to give a few talks on Vishnu Sahasranama, which directly glorifies Krishna. Last year there were some controversial topics raised in the festival. I didn't raise the topics, but they were brought to my notice. So controversy can rear its unwelcome head, welcome or unwelcome, depending on one's own personal attitude, at any time. Controversy can raise its unwelcome head, welcome or unwelcome, depending on your attitude, at any time. But hopefully, among devotees, there shouldn't be any objection to simply discussing the qualities of Krishna as described in Vishnu Sahasranama. Hare Krishna. So now the program is Kirtan. Has anyone been designated to lead the Kirtan? We have a volunteer. Okay, there are others also who are known as Kirtan leaders. Prabhu Nityananda, I was told, he's afraid to lead because one time I stopped him singing this Sri Rupa Manjari Pada in a anyway, it doesn't matter. You can also lead Kirtan. We won't shoot you. Hare Krishna.